I'm Andrew Barth Feldman, and you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, it's Michael Gerry, and you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Leslie Margarita, and you are listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, guys, this is Tommy Bracco, and you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and that's Sammy. Sammy and I, along with our wonderful partner, the Broadway Podcast Network, are delighted to welcome you to the second panel discussion, The Comeback Project, a conversation series to help Theatermakers restart. Oh, Sammy, I think you're muted.
Wouldn't be a digital panel if I didn't start muted. Our first panel featured theater makers from 5 different countries who've been pioneers in reopening their theaters in the wake of the pandemic and focused on lessons from their industries. And today, we're excited to focus on outdoor performance, a topic that we know many theater makers are increasingly focused on as we look ahead to an unprecedented number of outdoor performances this summer, given the relative COVID safety of outdoor events.
We are so fortunate to have these incredible panelists with us today. But before we introduce them, we've got a couple of reminders. First, throughout the conversation, please feel free to drop in any questions that you might have in the chat. And at the end of the discussion, we'll have a little Q&A and we'll be able to ask your questions to our amazing panelists.
And second, if you'd like to stay up to date on future conversations, you can join our mailing list via a link we'll put in the chat or at tinyurl.com/comeback-mailing-list. This conversation, as well as our first conversation, will be recorded and accessible after we wrap up today.
And now, we've given ourselves the challenge of introducing each of our panelists to you in just one sentence for the sake of time, which is tricky given how amazing they are. You can find their complete bios on our webpage.
First, please welcome the wonderful Mike Isaacson, who has produced over 25 plays and musicals on Broadway and is the artistic director and executive producer of the MUNY, America's oldest and largest outdoor musical theater with 11,000 seats and a robust summer season planned for 2021. Hi, Mike.
I'm first. You didn't tell me I'm first.
It's alphabetical.
I was like, oh gosh, Gerry's got so much experience. I'm going to listen and steal from him. Send me out there alone. Thanks.
No big here momentarily.
And right now,
let's talk to the guy who hasn't done it yet. Anyway, it's great to be here.
Thanks for being here. We'll bring you some friends
amazing.
now.
Yeah, exactly. And now, please welcome Gerry McIntyre, who is the Associate Artistic Director at the York Theater, and this past summer choreographed the acclaimed outdoor production of Godspell at Berkshire Theater Group, which is the first equity-approved production to go up during the pandemic. Friends!
Hi!
Hi.
How's everybody?
Great.
Good.
Good to see you.
Good.
Third, please welcome Andy Mientus, star of stage and screen in such productions as the Broadway revivals of Spring Awakening and Les Mis, Smash, and many more. This coming summer, Andy, a member of the Forest of Art and Company, will be performing in and serving as a conceiver of Alien Nation, an outdoor promenade production at the Theater Festival. Hi, Andy.
Hi. I'm praying. It's a windy day in upstate New York, and I'm hoping my internet behaves. I apologize if it doesn't. I'm happy to be here.
Praying to the theater gods. And now fourth, please welcome Jessica Paz, Tony Award-winning sound designer for her work on Hadestown and designer of 8 productions at the Public Stella Court Outdoor Theater, right here in the heart of New York City.
Hi, happy to be here. And just preemptive, I have no control over my cat. She may make appearances and or do crazy things, just FYI.
Yes, we got cute factor.
As you can tell, our panelists have an amazing array of experiences to share with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who will be moderating, to take it away.
Awesome. And I'm going to start off by asking some questions that we've prepared, but everybody, as I mentioned before, feel free to jump in. What we're really excited about is facilitating conversation between all of us who have had very different experiences as we venture into the unknown with all protocols and etc. So Gerry, we will kick it off with you because you have the distinction of choreographing the first AEA-approved production during the pandemic last summer, which is the outdoor production of Godspell at Berkshire Theater Group. I have to tell you personally, I was slated to direct something outdoors and I was like reading everything I possibly could last summer. So I was reading a lot about your production. We ended up going virtual, but I watched all of that and was so excited to see the incredible work that y'all did. Can you tell us about how that opportunity came about and how did you prepare for the production that, you know, had so many unknowns at the height of the pandemic last summer?
First of all, God, that's such a loaded question. We were supposed to do Godspell anyway. The Berkshire Theater Group was going to do it anyway. So, you know, when it came up and it was like, okay, there's a pandemic, we're going to go outdoors and we're going to still do Godspell. And I was like, okay. And now we called Actors Equity and got together with the whole team in Actors Equity and Alexa James at the Berkshire Theater Group, the company manager, and Kate McGuire, who is the artistic director. And we figured out how to make it safe, how to make this all work out. And it ended up to be like this 10-page document of like how to make it safe. And then even while we were trying to make it safe, it just kept going on and on to make it safer and safer. So the whole thing became like this, like a snowball of like, you can't really, like, I love to do pre-pro. I love to be prepared in the room, and so I don't have to waste anyone's time. So with this thing, there was no time to do really pre-pro because by the time we finally got to do it, I had 4 days to choreograph the whole show. Because it had been pushed back so long and so long and so long. So it was just like one of those things that, you know what, I'll never do it again, thank God. But I learned so much about how to like work on your feet. Because we would have, our stage manager would say, that's not COVID safe. He would come up to me like, they're too close to each other. When you sing, you have to face towards the audience, which is 25 feet away from the stage. When you're talking to each other, you can be 6 feet. When you're singing, you have to be 10 feet. Each of the performers have to be 10 feet apart. And when they're singing, if you're singing upstage, we put a partition, like a plastic screen in front of them, so they wouldn't have any droplets reaching the people who were 10 feet in front of them downstage. So this is every day of my life, like going in and figuring. It was more about math, really, when you think about it. You know, it's like I have to figure out how to make everyone safe and how to make a show that is Godspell, all about touching and being intimate and like learning about each other and not touch, no move, like we couldn't do any lifts, we couldn't touch each other. So that's an also obstacle, but we did it. No one got sick from the cast, the crew, or the audience, and we got extended and we got great reviews. So it was like, and Steven Schwartz came at the end and was crying about how we managed to make theater happen out of nothing. And this is what we do, though. I was never in, like, my union SDC asked me, like, are you worried about getting sick? And I was like, oh, no, that's not, I'm just trying to make a good show with some good steps. I never even thought about getting sick at all. All I thought about was just to make some theater happen in the world. And we did it. And it was really amazing to me.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up question. I was wondering, you know, did you feel safe throughout the process? But it seems like you felt safe throughout that process with all the protocols.
I couldn't feel more safe. We couldn't touch each other. We're all in bubbles. So all of the stuff that we did before, like, you know, we quarantined for 2 weeks before. So we were all in our own little bubbles. We all stayed together for that whole time and didn't go out, and we couldn't, you know, go out to restaurants and meet friends or anything. And we got tested 3 times a week, you guys. That was arduous. That was horrible. That was the worst part of it for me. Like, because, you know, that was that long cotton swab up your nose. That was in the beginning when it was, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It goes like to
Yeah.
your cranium, and you're just going, I'm going to die. Like, what is going on? So I lived through that, people. I lived through that, and but I never got to hug my cast, which was crazy. You know, you always want to hug your kiddo and have a cocktail after the show or something. Opening night, we just looked at each other from across the way, and we're like, "You did great. I love you. See you tomorrow." Just wild, just wild, wild, wild.
That's wild and so beautiful that you got to do the show. But yeah, some of those rituals that we're so used to, not being able to have those also kind of sting a little, I'm sure.
Oh, it does. It really does. And you know, there was our guy who's playing Jesus, Nicholas Edwards. He was singing "Beautiful City," and he had kind of a shakedown breakdown. And you know, when an actor has a shakedown breakdown, you used to go to the stage and hug them or something, and we couldn't do it. He was standing on stage and he was crying, and it was like that was the weirdest. It was so. It's exactly the opposite of.
Oh no, we were in the middle of such a good story. Well, we'll have to pick up when Gerry gets back. Mike, I'm assuming that you're also, as you're prepping for the summer, probably deeply engrossed in the protocol that it's going to take to be able to get your season up and running. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're planning and how that's different from the years prior?
Well, where we all were a year ago was, it was like this boulder going uphill that we're all trying to push, and we didn't know how far or what this was, right? So it was so fascinating listening to Gerry, like from our perspective, given how large the MUNY is, the number of people, what it is, there was just no way to even functionally consider it. And then from a public health perspective, bringing that many people together or thing, it was just sort of so clearly out of the question. Now we're in this really other, and I'm interested to hear everyone else's sort of moments. We're on this other thing where the boulder is rolling downhill faster and faster, right? So we're trying to bring in all the new information, work with all the unions and everybody to make it up to the moment, which is its own, really crazy challenging because, not all the health information is consistent.
Right.
Which is not to say it's wrong, but, Rhode Island just opened up today, said completely open. So I thought, okay, Newport Jazz Festival, those guys are high-fiving it, so you have to, you sort of look at it that way. I mean, the key thing for us, we had to, I guess it's sort of obvious, but you have to decide, or you have to divide audience and proscenium back, right? So for me, talking about proscenium back, it all just became the question of what is the safest possible. Now, we're very well set up because when you're working at the MUNY for most of your day, 90% of it, you're outdoor anyway. And we have the data right now, the scientific data to show that just greatly, in fact, just right before we came on, Sanjay Gupta was talking about it because people are beginning to ask about whether they need to wear masks outside or not. It sort of moved there. And just talking about how low the risk is. But our structures, our main rehearsal platforms and stuff, they're completely open air. So that's good. But the thing that we've been focusing on is getting ready for the conversation of the protocols, all based on an idea of vaccine, right? Vaccination, and where is everybody and what are they thinking in that? And so to that end, what time's all a blur? I'm gonna say like 3 or 4 weeks ago, we sent out a survey to everybody who we believe would be working backstage at the MUNY this summer. And it was a non-binding survey and you didn't have to answer, but it was basically a question of where are you? And you could also be anonymous in your answer. So just giving everybody the freedom and the comfort level. And we asked 4 questions. Are you vaccinated? 1 poke or 2, sort of, are you in the process? Are you planning on getting it once it's available to you? Do you have questions still that you're considering it, or you do not plan on being vaccinated? So immediately the replies became coming back. And, while I can't betray the data, I can just share with you, it was overwhelmingly encouraging. It surpassed all my greatest expectations, to be honest. So for fundamentally, I just looked at that. We all looked at that, me and my colleagues. We said, okay, the covenant is, if you're going to do this, you want to keep people safe as possible. And what is that? And when you have that tool, that really increases your ability to be honest and forthright and come up with all the structures and the plans. In terms of us working with equity, we're finalizing our plan right now, and we're going to probably submit late next week. Mm-hmm. But we've had, we hired a woman named Nancy Pittleman, who is a AEA stage manager. She's worked at the MUNY, she's worked in New York. And we brought her on in December or January because she had done the COVID training. So she's our chief COVID compliance officer. And a lot of information. So the thing about the MUNY is it's not we're an ocean liner, right? We can't turn quickly. You have to prepare. And, the stage comes out every year. And then, so we had to make, all our financial creative decisions have to really be made months in advance, which in this environment is really hard. But we came up with the protocols. IATSE signed off, meetings. We have an on-site officer. By the time we're in full season, I think we'll have I can't remember, 6 to 8 daily COVID officers on, different parts of the campus and what that'll be. But we agreed on a protocol. The stage has gone in. We've also, on a separate thing, the whole facility has been under construction, which was happening anyway. So balancing those things.
My gosh.
And, so we've had phase 1, phase 2, which is basically mid-May-ish. Administrative returns, wardrobe begins to come in, and those plans are in and under discussion. And then the big master plan to open up the season. So it's a lot, but I think what we're all basing it on right now is vaccination rates and, and then we're all watching our local and national rates of sickness, really, honestly. So right. It's that, but it's a brutally moving target. You wake, I'm sure I've got some head nods there. You wake up one day, you think you know where you are, and 48 hours you have completely different information, and you go, okay, and you've got to call everybody. But sort of listening to Gerry, what he said about, okay, we had to choreograph it in 4 days, right? Everybody, this community, these people, theater people, they figure it out, and people really want to do this and be back together. It's going to be brutally difficult. I mean, it just is, but hey, we have to do it.
I can't wait to check in, after the season and hear your takeaways after you've gone through the other side of it.
I'll be in a bar.
with lots of drinks, definitely. Lots of drinks. I know that it's a huge undertaking. To pass the baton momentarily, Andy, I know you're also in the middle of planning for your production that's going to also be happening outdoors. Can you talk to us a little bit about Alien Nation and what y'all have planned for Williamstown?
Yeah. So almost a year ago exactly, early days of the pandemic, my husband and I were quarantining up here in upstate New York where we live, and a local business that we love very much was really struggling. They were closed down and didn't know how they were going to make it. And so we just had this notion that we might, like a Judy Garland movie musical, get some friends together and put on a show and help maybe raise some money for the business. About it, we thought, we could really try to pioneer some ideas about how theater can be made safely and, in this time, and really crack open our heads and our notions of what theater looks like and what theater can be. And so we hoped to do a ticketed public show. Again, this was early days. We didn't know how the pandemic was going to play out. That became impossible. But in the meanwhile, we'd begun meeting with and inviting artists who we admired to form this company. And we were meeting over Zoom and just talking it was group therapy more than it was, rehearsal for quite some time. And when it became clear that we couldn't do, a big old ticketed public show, we thought we could at least keep up the experimenting and make something just as, consenting adults all in the same place, not as, employed actors, etc. And so we did that. We sort of came up with our own protocol that we all felt safe about how to quarantine, how to get tested, coming to the one place. We all lived together. We ate all the same meals. I mean, we really kept the bubble very strict and devised these different modes of creating theater, all outdoor. And so we ended up with this kind of tech demo experiment that we called American Dream Study for an invited little crowd of close friends and people that we thought might help take the idea forward. The first act of it took place in various locations in a active neighborhood, and the audience used an app to follow video directions, and then with headphones in, that was the soundtrack of the experience. So they're walking around, this video is telling them where to go, they arrive, there's a live performance happening, and this all the sound of that is in their ears. There's no sound projected outward. The second act was the concept of a drive-in movie. So all the cars, people's cars pulled up to one central location where we all performed, and they all tuned in to an FM radio station that we broadcast from an FM transmitter. So it was just like being at a drive-in movie, but live element. And then the third act was we decided to see what we could get away with. It was totally acoustic with no technology. So it involved the audience being very, very spread out in a big open field on a farm, and actors making entrances from literally a mile away with a lantern. You watch these incredibly slow, and then, some acoustic singing around a bonfire. Using the lessons that we learned then, we've been meeting since, and luckily one of the friends that we invited to take a look at these ideas was Mandy Greenfeld of Williamstown Theater Festival, who has invited us to be a part of their first live season back, all outdoor work. And so we're going to take some of those ideas, try a few new ones, and this time we've partnered with some playwrights to make a more deliberately narrative experience that hopefully will be dazzling and adventurous for the audience.
How much is are the protocols dictating the art, or is it vice versa? Since you're generating a piece, I'm wondering how much of that plays into how you're approaching the writing.
Totally, it very much dictates the form of what we're doing. My husband and I both love immersive theater and have been involved in making some over the years. And quickly it was very apparent that we couldn't do what some people call walk the dog style immersive theater, where you are free to roam and you can kind of pursue whatever interests you and kind of discover the show, discover the narrative. That is unsafe. You cannot control audience's proximity. So it then became, we have to very much control where the audience is and how many of them are in these pods. And so last summer, during our experimental step, since we knew nothing, and it was a very small group of people that got to come check it out, everyone's pod of audience members, of people viewing it, were their own personal pods, people they came with, so 1 to 2 people. So the more pods you want to have, the more locations you have to have, and the more locations you have to have, the more actors you have to have, because you can't arrive at something and have there be no actors, and not every single moment can be a solo. And so it really dictated how many locations we had, how many people were populating those locations, and just the sheer fact of we can never have a moment where we allow the audience to do whatever they want. We have to very much hold their hand without holding their hand. So we couldn't, that's where the app came in, which was a way to guide them without having a literal physical person guiding them, or having a lot of audience together, making sure no one got lost. They had their own way to know where to go. And then we found that the taking that app as a solution to a challenge, it presented its own opportunity of like, just how fascinating it is to like watch something happen, 300 yards away, but you're hearing the audio of it right here, like a little podcast, that like ASMR, little personal little audio experience just for you. And you could like take out your earbud and it's just you're just in a town in upstate New York. It's just, it doesn't know you're watching a show, like that. There was something really magic about that. And it came from just trying to keep people safe. So yeah, it's dictated our form a lot. And then of course the content, especially last summer when it was also fresh, couldn't help but comment on what, we were all experiencing. And so I suspect that will play in this summer as well.
I'm excited to see it if I can get out there.
Yeah.
Jessica, we'll shift a little bit to kind of the practical side of things in terms of how we make outdoor theater happen. Sound, I think, is probably the most important. Mike and Gerry can probably chime in and say, Andy was just talking about, sound in your ears is so important. But probably the hardest thing to control is probably sound. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. And I'm curious about your experience in designing for outdoor theater and how that's different from indoors.
I mean, outdoors is different than indoors in the sense that, the very first thing is there's no roof, there are no walls, the speakers are pointing at the audience, but they're also, making sound go out into the world, right? So the speaker's performance is very important, and there's a lot of care taken into that. At one of the venues I work at, we have basically a rep system that is meant and has been designed for the space, and that is owned by the theater. And then we supplement that with rental for, what the console is going to be and what the microphones are going to be, et cetera, and so on. I know that this year on one of those projects, instead of doing like a lavalier mic in the hairline, which is pretty standard, we're doing a boom style mic that goes over both ears because the actors are going to need to be putting masks on and off when they're off stage. We're going to have the usual sound people backstage would be able to help the actors get into the microphones that are in their hair, and the wig department would be able to help with that. But they are not going to be allowed to do that this time around. And so the over-ear boom style microphone is something that we can hand to the actors and say, this is what you have to do every day to get into, and it sort of creates less variables, right? So if someone doesn't get it on quite right, or it shifts a little bit, it won't affect us as much as, if a mic in someone's hair didn't get clipped in well enough and sort of falls to the back of their head, that's not something we can control. And because what we call A2s, they're the backstage audio folks, aren't going to be able to just walk up to an actor and help them fix their microphone in the middle of the show. There's going to be a lot of restrictions around that, mask protocols. All of the performers will be in a particular zone. There's going to be like 5 zones in the space, and so myself as a designer will be in zone 5, which can't ever interact with zone 1, which is the performers. So I won't even be able to go on stage and help.
Wow.
Figure something out with them, right? We'll have to sort of take notes, and then we'll be able to address those notes in the morning when the actors aren't with us. And then the backstage sound team that's working with the actors will be in zone 2, which is very close to zone 1. So they'll have access to zone 1, but on a very limited basis, like only when it's necessary, only if fully masked, only if after, hand sanitizer, etc. So it just adds a whole other layer to what we're trying to accomplish and how we can interact with each other. Because and I will say, a lot of I think all of the projects I'm involved in are operating as if there is no vaccine yet, right? Like all of the protocols are based on not whether or not someone is vaccinated, and they are based on what the protocols need to be just for COVID, period.
That is probably safe to say that is not the case across the board for everyone, that everyone's approaching the protocols in terms of like non-vaccinated? Like that's not even part of the consideration in terms of planning?
I think that, that may change as time moves on and more people get vaccinated. But right now, it in New York anyway, it's only become available as of a few days ago for anyone over 16, right? And it's been progressively opening up, and more locations are opening up. There's a new location in Times Square that's particularly for entertainment workers, but there's no way to guarantee that once we're all on site together that we're all going to be vaccinated or all have our second shots. And so I think it's just safer. For these organizations to be operating as if, and taking all precautions as if we don't have a vaccine yet. And eventually that'll catch up, and we'll be able to see where we all land in each city and state and across the country with COVID once the majority of people are vaccinated and we reach herd immunity, right? I think that's sort of the goal that we're all working toward, but we don't really know what that looks like until we get there.
Well, that's not the premise we're going on. We're going on herd immunity backstage. And I feel very confident in this call that we have that. Now, that said, there's certainly not lax protocols. And we have to figure out in different departments if we know how people are reassigned and we're doing the zone. So you don't abdicate it completely, but it does change that, because if we had to do sort of what Gerry had to undergo last season, we couldn't do it at all, given what we are, the number of people, and that. So that information in our strategy and our implementation absolutely was a part of it. And as we all know, in that last, Equity acknowledged that in that last, what they put out, like, this is a new thing. And that was very, very important. If they hadn't done that, we couldn't have. So that became, okay, how do we do this? And we will be asking for people to verify that they have, that will be part of it. Which from the data we have, I don't anticipate being a problem at all. Sorry, Gerry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm doing a show at the Berkshire Theater Group, a play called Nina Simone for Women. And everybody in the staff has to be vaccinated. Everybody in the show, stagehand, crew, everybody has to be vaccinated to be in the show. And I mean, there's a lot of people like scoffing, like, I don't want to be told that I need to be vaccinated. And I just have to say out loud, I'm sorry, but if you don't want to be vaccinated, then that's just your privilege, but you can't be in the show. That's just it's the truth of the thing. And insurance reasons, there's a lot of reasons, and Equity wants everyone to at least have that thing, at least they have a vaccine, they've been vaccinated. And I feel safer with it, that everyone is. I really do feel safer with it. I understand, and I realize that's your right to be vaccinated or not, but then you can't come play with us, and that's just the bottom line.
And to be clear, I'm the designer, so I'm not necessarily privy to all of the conversations that go into planning all of these things, right? I just, from the position that I'm in and the training and the conversations that I've had, understand how these things affect me and how my backstage team is affected, and when and if they can interact with the performers. But I'm certain that the performers all have to, or anyone inside zone 1, right, need to all either be quarantined or vaccinated. But I don't know that these projects are requiring vaccination, which I guess is a project by project basis. I'm also doing a show in Korea, and I will be fully vaccinated by the time I need to go to Korea, but I will still be mandated to do the 14-day quarantine. Because that's just the rules right now.
Right, that's the protocol. You guys stick to the protocol.
And to your point, some of the things that we're discussing, like even if let's just say two backstage colleagues are working together and they're both vaccinated, depending on what it is, they will be required to still wear masks, and in some places still probably wear gloves. Like you don't eradicate it, but it's just sort of shifting, just breaking it down there.
Yeah.
Right.
How many people are you going to have at the MUNY? How many in the audience?
Well, isn't that the fun one? And very honestly, as we talk today on April 22, I don't know. We are in. So our initial thought was, again, for all of us, we were all, the vaccine sort of became real, right after the election in December? It's all a blur, right? And we saw, okay, something's coming. And how do we, So we usually, in an ordinary season, we open mid-June. So we immediately saw, we pushed back, and we don't open our first show till July 5. And we moved into greater there. And right now we've slotted what is traditional, our 7 shows. That's based on us being able to have a capacity of essentially 80% or higher, which you looked in December and January. People thought that was a real possibility. Some people still do. Right now we've got states opening up. It's a very complex civic conversation. And also, you take into account, I mean, the other factors that are very interesting to me that are, God love them. Our subscribers have been amazing. They donated last year. We have literally our highest renewal rate in our history. I mean, the sales are crazy.
It's great.
And, it's a mess. And we surveyed and they're like, we'll be there. So people want to be there.
Right.
We have to go, okay, exactly where will it be in July? What isn't that? And it's a very active conversation right now. And we, given that time that we need to do things, if we have to reconfigure, we'll have to pull the trigger mid to late May. So it's very active right now.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's a long way of saying I don't have that answer. but I will say this, we had to look at every scenario. And what I said to the board was not performing something is not an option. That if we were, so last year, I don't want to get into, last year we went online and it went really well and I was really proud of it and I never want to do it again. And that's a whole other conversation, right?
I hear you.
This is where I'm at,
Yeah.
But you have, part of the MUNY is literally ritual. People have been coming for decades, their families, right?
Yes.
And that was gone and they deeply missed it. And if you know anything about ritual, if it's gone for a long time, people will adjust their habits.
Yeah.
So we needed to be there, and then there needed to be a sense of that. And then frankly, to be very honest, a big, very important, compelling reason to me and all my colleagues is we employ an incredible amount of people over the summer. I mean, literally 800 jobs weekly during the season.
Incredible.
And we have to hire as many, people have to get back to work. So there was this onus, and to their credit, there are some scenarios that if we have to do that, we could lose in the millions. But the board was behind, let's go, let's do something. So, it's like everybody, I'm sure you're measuring it as you go along.
Yeah.
I love that space so much at the MUNY, by the way. I love that space. I'm so glad you're doing something. I really am.
So now I have an interesting question, and this one's not necessarily related to COVID, but I want to talk about weather, because weather is like the big factor. I think the other big one after sound of how to manage things that you cannot control, like inclement weather. So I'm curious to everyone, and maybe we start with you, Mike, since you've done a lot of these. How do you handle the weather situation?
Well, that we have down to a science. Although I will say the amazing thing that's changed in the last 3 to 5 years was everything used to be in place where you had to inform the audience that was going on. They've all got these in their hands and they're way ahead of you. So that sort of thing has sort of gone away. But we have specifically at the MUNY, when we know it's a questionable night or maybe a questionable night, we have a direct line, literally phone line to the weather service, which is in Iowa, where who's ever on that night can tell us it'll be this for 6 minutes, it'll be that for 12 minutes, you'll be through, you'll be clear, this is there, like very, very specific. And for the most part, they're right. So that's the information. And, you know, we stop and start the show, they sweep the stage, you know, there's a whole thing, the cast goes in the dressing room and, you know, and then people have memories of a lifetime, you know, it is the spirit of the thing. And we, I think we forget in the pursuit of this perfect, magical creation that sometimes that brutal, honest truth is just as magical to the audience. And you feel the energy go a different way. And then when you come back, everybody's cheering and screaming and, you know, the whole thing, and on you go. And it really can be a beautiful reminder of we've all come here to play. We're all just playing. And that is how we handle it.
It's the same at the Delacorte. The only difference is that we don't have a direct line to the weather service. I'm a little jealous, Mike. That's pretty nice.
Text me, I'll share it.
I don't know that the weather in Iowa is going to apply to us in New York, but yeah, it's the same. You know, we certainly hold the show whenever it's going to be not safe for the actors, right? And usually at the point at which it becomes unsafe for the actors, it becomes unsafe for the equipment that they're wearing on their bodies, right? You know, generally speaking, they're wearing $4,000 worth of equipment on them with just you know, their transmitter and their microphone. And then you add an accordion player and, you know, a transmitter and mic or plug for that. And now you're talking about, or you're double miking somebody, you're talking about a single person can have $10,000 worth of equipment on them. Generally speaking, you don't want those things to get wet. So, but like I said, when it becomes too inclement for the performers and too dangerous, then and a safety issue is usually when it becomes a safety issue for the equipment. And the audiences love it. You know, there is a rule at the Delacorte actually that if you're sitting in the audience and the show is actively performing and it is raining, you cannot take out an umbrella because it will obstruct the view of the people behind you. So you can, you know, you wear your poncho and they are diehards, man. They are diehards. They live for that. They live for it. So, and in the past, in pre-COVID times, if the show gets held, the audience is allowed to leave and they can go stand under the awnings just outside the theater and we'll then start back up. But there's a bunch of people, I tell you, I've been surprised over the years who just, they're like in their ponchos and they're like, nope, I'm not moving. I'm just going to wait it out. And frankly, when the show is held, they are allowed to take out their umbrellas, but not when actors are performing.
That is amazing. Only in New York City is that.
Oh, they are diehards.
In Godspell, there was 2 shows that got canceled because of weather, and they were worried because it was rain and wind. So they were worried that the tent was going to blow down, which things I've never said before in a sentence. And I unlike Mike, I can't call Jesus or God and say, "What's the deal today?" But they love it though. They really love, the audience loves to be like, because they think they're in on something, you know, when something happens, when it starts to rain, they really believe it. They're like, I was there the night it rained. It's great.
And it's lovely for the performers as well. Like, but it's a challenge, particularly in our format where we do not have the benefit yet of the PA system, someone to like make a call of when some rain is too much rain, when it's unsafe, and particularly in our format where each location that the audience is traveling to is its own site-specific thing. What might be safe for me and Nikki James under an awning at an inn is not safe at all for Kathy Ang on a kayak in the middle of a lake, which is something that happened last summer. And so we had a very rainy couple of days when we were like going to do the run-throughs of the thing. And luckily by showtime we were okay, but we really were unclear about how we would alert people if, there was an elaborate system of like the actor will find out via the app and have to just literally stop what they're doing and like try to tell everyone to like take cover or whatever. So that is something that we're very actively working on right now to, ensure when it is a ticketed, full Williamstown season thing, official thing, that everyone is safe and that there's an actual way to let people know and to make those determinations about like what is a lovely scene for me and Nikki being able to like comment on the fact that it's raining and what is an actively dangerous scene for someone, on a kayak in the water. But I will say that just selfishly as a performer, I really love when we had some like jazz elements of fog, of rain, of bugs, of, Mike is absolutely right that is the thing I think people are missing, that jazz element of live theater, that spontaneity. It's extra in an outdoor setting. It's something that, we all like tell the legends of the time that our like pants didn't button or we fell down some stairs. But when you're outside, like the possibilities of those jazz elements just multiply exponentially, and it is really magical.
I'd be interested in your opinion on this. I've come to believe that audiences at an outdoor theater are much more aware of being in an audience and what that means and aware of each other than audiences in an indoor theater. I think in an indoor theater, you go more into a mode of me and the work, and then there are other people at moments. Whereas in outdoor theater, there's just such a sense, and I don't know if it's because of the sky or what that is, but there's a more of a primal sense.
I think you're right. I think that it has to do with the fact that there is an absence of a ceiling and walls that enclose you away from the organic world, right? So there is this stage, and behind it is the Belvedere Castle and the Turtle Pond, and there might be a raccoon that makes an entrance in some scene, and but the audience is all there with their snacks and their little bottles of wine, and they're hanging out, and there's there's other things happening around you in the organic world, and somehow, particularly in the Delacorte, it becomes a magic place, right? It just becomes a magic place, and it's so beautiful. You get the beautiful sunsets behind you. You get the swans in the back of the lake, and it's just incredible. And I think they feel part of something. They feel like they're actually contributing to the environment.
Yeah. I found it really amazing to watch, because during Godspell it was like people were scared or ready to come out of the house, so all that stuff was going on, so that you would see people come in like women with their pocketbooks like really clutched to them with their friends or their party, and they're 6 feet away from the other audience member, and then by the end of the first act you'd see the pocketbook go to the ground, you'd see the shoulders drop, and them applauding, and it was just so wild to see the backs of these people who were afraid to leave their house because they had no idea. No one had gone to the theater. Like we had no idea what was going to bring, what the audience was going to be like. And the fact that the first night when the cast came on stage, you guys, and the audience started to clap, and everybody was just so relieved that we all made it. That we all got there. We all got to this place that we could experience some live theater, that we were all just weeping. It was just one of the most amazing things that I will never forget in my life. Just like that sound. We remember, because we forgot about applause. Anybody? Like I was like, we hadn't heard applause. We hadn't heard laughter. In live theater, it's so long. It was that all that stuff just came like reaching back. So like those audiences, like when they finally got safe and calm in their brains, was such a glorious event.
Oh gosh, it's making my heart swell, because I've had to do a lot of these Zoomsicles, and you don't get any applause. The show's over, and it's like, oh well, that happened. And you just miss that. And like you were saying before we lost you momentarily about like you can't even like hug your actors or your castmates or your creative team, and it's so different from what we're used to. like antithetical to us as theater people.
I've never
I'm
heard Zoomsicle before. That's funny. That's good.
Yeah. Lots of Zoomsicles. I'm curious before I ask you a fun question, is Jessica, when you're designing for outdoor, do you factor in the inclement weather? Is there like a different design? Like, is there, a separate design for if there is like a windy day? Do you have like up levels? Like, I'm curious about that.
No, I mean, the speakers that we use are specifically weather resistant, either gasketed, etc., because they hang on a web above the theater. We can't, and we don't want to have to repair things all the time, right? So we do that. I mean, I build the system to accommodate for, having to make it X much louder if there's a helicopter overhead, but there's a limit to, physics. There's just a limit to what you can do. And if the helicopter's hanging out overhead for 20 minutes, which they're not allowed to do, and we have to compete with that, we can. But there isn't like it's going to rain tonight. There's this other plan, right? That's not really how we work. We have, there's a plan on the ground in terms of the A2s backstage working with the actors and, listening extra and making sure that their microphones aren't getting wet or et cetera and so on, and kind of being at the ready. But other than that, no, I just build it to accommodate. And wind is wind. And I think it's something that, we can't really do anything about, because we don't want to put these big giant windscreens on the microphones. But we do sometimes have a technique where we actually use a razor blade and we cut slivers of windscreen and we shove them inside the caps of the microphone. So there is some windscreen in there.
Cool.
But sometimes you just can't deal with it. And we haven't had too much trouble. Like I said, it's a magical place. And sometimes on like even the windiest days, we get to the performance and like all of those things kind of subside a little. It's like we live in the eye of the storm a little bit. It's kind of crazy and magical and wonderful.
Andy, as a performer, is there anything that you noticed, like performing outdoors, like in terms of, I need to do this extra warm up for my voice, or if it's colder, this affects how I can perform this day, or if it's too hot, things like that I'm curious about.
Yeah, well, there was only one moment of singing in the thing we attempted last year, and we learned it and performed it masked, which I hope to never ever do ever again. I can do a lot in a mask, and I cannot sing in a mask. It's really horrible.
Yeah.
But it's coming back to weather. It's just sort of the extra awareness to really be ready for anything. Like, you have to be ready for anything on stage, but just when you break out of those walls and when your audience might show up, they might not, they might have gotten lost. You might have to guide them in some way. The living, breathing organism that you're working inside of, as I mentioned, the first act of the thing that we experimented with last summer was very much in a functioning town during daylight hours, like not a private roped off campus, but an actual town. And I'm pretty certain how Williamstown is going to go for at least part of the evening. You're going to be on the Williams College campus while people are going about their day, and things happen. People come up and ask questions. My favorite story from last summer is we had one of our actors did a piece on a playground, and we did 2 run-throughs of the thing, but one of the nights there happened to be a bunch of kids playing on the playground, and she's not about to kick them off. We were guests in this community, and so they just sort of like became involved. I, of course, was doing my bit elsewhere, so I didn't see this, but the stories are legend that like the kids were like involved, and the people watching were like, where'd you find all those kids? How did you teach them how to do this thing? That anything that happens becomes part of it. And like, I love that Jessica brought up like the sunset of just the magic of that is something singular every night, but somehow the sunset and the raccoons and the problems, the wind, the rain, it all is somehow in concert and makes this singular night that people are like, you forget what is deliberate design and what isn't, even though you know the actors couldn't have possibly planned the sunset. It just that was the play the night you saw it. And so yeah, I'm talking less as a performer now, but all these things are married in my mind. But yeah, really being ready for absolutely anything and being a good sport about it. Like, there are bugs, there is rain, there is, not every actor can do the outdoor performing. Like Mike, I know so many of my friends have worked at the MUNY. And it was a big employer of us. That was like the holy grail in college. Everyone wanted to book the MUNY in college. And I just remember hearing the stories about, rehearsing outdoors and the wind and the rain, and just thinking like, wow, that's the real thing. That is primal theater. And some people I think would really blanch at that kind of thing. And I was really excited for all that weird stuff to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really true about that is, I've learned at the MUNY that it does require a certain type of performer, but between the 12 days to mount a major musical, and we do it, and all those elements you're talking about, it really brings something out in people. And I feel like they leave with a certain muscle or a certain strength they may not have known they've had. And also the other thing that's true, I think, about outdoor listening to some of this is that there's a purity to it. If this is what I say, and it's ridiculous, but it's true. If you describe everything about the MUNY on a piece of paper, it makes no logical sense. If it were a business plan today, you would never do it. Outdoor, middle of summer, it's crazy, right? But it's existed for over 100 years. And that's the mystery. And that's the obligation for everybody as we sort of pass through to participate in that and make sure it continues. And then, this is where the audience at the MUNY treats it like, it's theirs. It's like the closest thing you'll have to a sports team. So like if somebody kills a solo, they go insane. And so you get this sense of appreciation that's not just for the show, but it's for you. It's absolutely, that audience is one that feels you've come here to give us your gifts. So, and that really, this is a tough business, and it's just tough for everybody. And I've seen that sort of really help people out kind of sometimes right when they needed it, to remind them, oh, this is the central connection.
Yeah, I think we're all missing that. Gerry, you had something to add on to that?
Well, I just want to say, like, I played Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar at the MUNY, and Herod has one song, and he's one song and out, and he's the comic character. So when I took my bow the first night at the MUNY, I thought that's what heaven's going to be like. When I finally get there, everyone, like 10,000 people are going to be screaming for me. It's like, that's what I'm living for right now. It's the most, and it cuts to your soul. You're like, are you kidding me right now? This is happening? These people, it's so amazing. I love that. And it's hot, but I don't care. I didn't care at all. I was like, yes, keep clapping for me. I'm in. I'm completely in.
Well, it's also listening to everybody. The other thing that I work very hard of, what can destroy the whole thing is any level of fear, right? So I say it from day one, no fear allowed. Let's be who we are. Let's do what we can do. And we're going to link arms, and we're going to, hold hands on opening night and see where we fly. And there's no failure. It's just us doing what we can do. And I think the outdoor thing, and particularly now, for everything we're all trying to do this coming summer, everyone's going to have to really tap into that, because we are all going to have to be even more fearless in all of this.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful way, I think, to segue into our little wrap up, because I wanted to, before we go to the Q&A, ask everyone for their biggest piece of advice that they could pass along to someone who is going to be tackling outdoor theater for the first time. So whoever wants to jump in.
I would say what I said before. It's just that you can prepare so much, and there's a lot of people who are just obsessed with if something happens that I'm not prepared, I don't know what to do. I'm telling you the honest truth. You can something is going to happen that you did not prepare for. This is the new world. This is it. There's going to be something, so you have to be ready. I usually say in the beginning, like I usually have a plan A and a B and a C when I go into rehearsal. But now I'm up to E and F during COVID. I'm up to E and F, and that's all. And and you got to give yourself a break. You got to give yourself a break because you can't control this thing. It's too huge.
I would say check for ticks, especially if you're working the way we work in fields, in nature. Charge your phone before you start. Hydrate, and know that all the weird challenges. Sort of back to what I was saying before. When it rains, when there's bugs, when children flood your performance space unexpectedly, that is the stuff you'll remember forever. That's the best.
I would say bring clothing options. Like I'm being really serious. I bring winter boots, my winter coat, a couple of pairs of extra socks, and I also keep a pair of shorts. And you wake up in the morning, you put on your jeans, and it's cool outside, and then you're in the theater, and all of a sudden it's 110 degrees, and you're like, oh my God, I need shorts desperately. So I keep a pair of shorts and some sandals in the theater, and you'd be surprised. Even in the middle of August, I've used my winter coat and my winter boots because it's rained and it's gotten very cold, and you will be super grateful to have clothing options.
D, all of the above. I think that everything's been hit. I think if you've never done it, I just really resonate with what Gerry said. Is you've got to, as if being in the theater, you have any element of control anyway. But whatever last vestige you may have, you really have to trust letting it go in this environment. And in the best sense, if you're open to what it creates in you and what you're able to create with others in this and what those possibilities are, it can be really satisfying.
Perfect. That's so beautiful. I also like the plan A through plan F because that's how I roll too. So I liked that. So they'd still be ready for none of those to be able to work. So we'll go into our Q&A. Friends backstage, if you'll share some with us. Can you talk about a time that something unexpected happened in your experience performing outdoors and how you dealt with it?
I'm silent.
There was one day where, under normal circumstances, we would hold for rain, but we had already held the show once for rain and brought the audience back in and the performers back out after sweeping the stage. And it was press night and the New York Times was there, and we were 7 minutes from the end of the show and when it started raining again. And at the Delacorte, we're not allowed to perform beyond midnight because there's a noise ordinance, right? So we just pushed through, like all the performers on stage, everybody's stage management, and we were just all super behind it. And it was a very expensive performance because we had a lot of microphones to replace the next day, but we made it. And it was, and I actually had some friends in the audience there, and one of them who had worked with us at the Delacorte in prior years, and just came up to us at the sound console after the show was over, and they were just absolutely, it looked like they had just come out of a lake. It was incredible. It was a really fun night.
One of our run-throughs of our experiment last summer, we had a tech thing. As I mentioned, it was all with this app. That was what kept the clock moving of these simultaneous scenes happening. And we had a tech fail right at the top, luckily right at the top, because I don't know what we would have done if it had been somewhere in the middle. And so we just had to start over, but that led to like a 20-ish minute kind of hiccup in the program. The problem with that is that we were the whole evening was scheduled very deliberately with the sun, to like that, you know, Act 1 was in daylight, Act 2 was like in twilight, but your headlights were pointing at the thing, and then Act 3 was around a bonfire. And so suddenly these scenes, which were designed to be viewed in, like, navigated to and performed safely in daylight, and even just seen, were like becoming increasingly dark. And by the last sort of round through the thing, it was getting quite dark. And going back to the girl on the lake, in the kayak, she's on a lake in a kayak. Like, there were street lights, luckily, for the things that were happening on the streets, but this poor girl is, and so my husband, in like running around like Jurassic Park, like trying to figure out like how to make this better. He's like, oh, I know, we'll pull a car right up and point the headlights at her. That's what we were about to do for Act 2. And so this will be fine. And he does, and you can see her, and it's beautiful. And then he notices that she's like really wildly gesticulating, and he's like, what is she, what's she doing? And then realized that like all the bugs on the lake like converged to the light, and now she's lost in a swarm of like bugs. Anyway, we had a good laugh about it afterward. Luckily, she was fine, and you know, was very gracious in forgiving all of us for what happened. But that was the funniest story, I think.
Oh my God. I got nothing like that.
Yeah, I got a book of them. I mean, I can, you know, yeah, stay all night, try the veal. I mean, I could go on forever. But yeah. So I mean, I will say, and it's literally, we don't have time for the whole story, but she actually talked about it when the New York Times did that article about outdoor theater sometime last summer, I guess. Beth Level doing Hello Dolly at the MUNY, and it literally started to rain at the top of that number. And what happened with her, the stage, the audience, I know this sounds crazy, it was the most psychically powerful thing I've ever been a part of in my life. Because something went on, and she led them there, and 10,000 people became unhinged for the title number of Hello Dolly. And it was like WWE wrestling. They were not going to let anybody stop. And it was like, it was really, I don't have the vocabulary to describe what happened, but in that sense of everybody becoming something different, it was wild.
Oh, wow. Love it. Okay, let's see what else we got from our audience. Any advice for achieving good sound outdoors without a large budget?
I mean, I think that, you know, crap in, crap out, right? I in my work, I'm always thinking that I want the better microphone, right? The best microphone you can use is going to give you the best sound, and that's going to sound better through a not great speaker than a not great microphone through a really expensive speaker, right? So I think that that's applicable indoors or outdoors. And, you know, speaker choice and speaker position, you always want everyone in the audience to have the same experience. So your coverage is super important. But certainly microphones.
Awesome advice. All right, y'all, we are hitting our time, so we're gonna wrap it up here. But I just want to take the opportunity again to thank our awesome panelists. Thank you so much. You've given us such amazing, incredible information and advice that we'll take with us, not only for outdoor theater, but also for just creating in these very crazy times. So thank you all so much for being a part of today.
Thank you so much. And Andy, come see me. You're going to be at Williamstown. I'll be at Berkshire.
Oh my God! Let's have a meetup.
Okay, I mean, come on.
Come on.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take